Welcome everybody to Don't Freak Out. We assume you're here because you've been freaking out and you're in the right place. Who here has ever spoken to an agent or editor before in their life on purpose? Okay. Who has ever thrown up on an agent or editor? Okay, that's what we're trying to prevent, so good starting place. I'm Luke Peterson. I'll be moderating this panel. I'm going to let everybody just introduce themselves, starting with Kenna because she's the most awake.
I'm not drunk enough for this. Okay, I'm Kenna. I am an editor with Jellyfish Press, although I don't really do that anymore. But technically, I'm still on the website. So I'm also the manager for Writing Excuses. I help Luke run Futurescapes up in Sundance as a writing convention, which involves sitting down and having your work critiqued by a bunch of authors and editors and agents. So that's pretty much me. Did I miss anything?
That's great.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
You wouldn't let me rest on the last panel, so.
Yeah, we'll try and do that again. Okay.
My name is Lisa Mangum. I'm managing editor of Shadow Mountain Publishing here in Salt Lake. I've been in publishing since 1997, and I've been managing editor since 2014. By day, I work with authors and edit their books and take pitches at conferences like this. By night, I write young adult love stories and contemporary romance. Weekends, I'm obsessed with Supernatural. Just so you know.
Yeah.
I'm Charlie N. Holmberg. I am an author. I wrote Paper Magician series and some other stuff. I have an agent and an editor, and I've cried at the feet of many.
I'm Emily R. King, the author of the Hounded Queen series. I also have her same agent and her same editor. I want to be Charlie.
All right, perfect. So I'm trying to think where best to start. Probably horror stories. Have we done anything stupid or experienced anything stupid?
Can I go first?
Yeah.
Right off the bat.
Yeah, I was trying to think of when I did something dumb, and I couldn't think of anything because you'd kind of block it out because you don't want to admit it. But I was at SCBWI. My good friends.
Which stands for?
Society of Children's Writers and Illustrators. Yes?
All right.
Okay, so my friend's agent was there, and she said, you should go introduce yourself. Go. I didn't have an agent at the time. I actually landed an agent about 6 months later. So I waited and waited and waited until everybody was done talking to him. And then his handler was pushing him to go because he had pitches. So I started talking to him, and he starts leaving. And so I follow him to the escalator. You know how they talk about elevator pitches? How you should be able to do everything in 30 seconds? I literally did it on the way up the escalator. My pitch, and at the end he's like, and then he laughed. And I stood there and I thought, it was the most embarrassing 45 seconds of my life. And I wish I hadn't followed him. I met him, actually, he came to Storymakers a couple years later, and I don't think he remembered that I followed him up the escalator. I didn't remind him, but anyway, it was a little humiliating.
Okay, who else?
One time I was in an elevator with Eddie Schneider, and I thought he was really cute, so I didn't say anything to him.
I have two. One that will probably freak you out, and one that will probably not freak you out. For the same reason, the elevator, I have been known at conferences like this to be in an elevator with people and say, so pitch your book to me right now. I'm getting off on the 5th floor. You have until then. Go. And just to see what you do. And everybody freaks out. It's kind of a game I play.
That's awesome, though.
It makes me laugh. It's just,
That's awesome.
I can't help it. To date, I've been doing these kinds of things for a long time, and to date, I've only ever had one person cry during a pitch session, which was super uncomfortable for everybody. And it wasn't even.
I thought we agreed you weren't going to talk about.
Oh, sorry. It was an example of somebody who she had not done her homework on the kinds of things that Shadow Mountain publishes, because what she was pitching was nice. It was fine. It was a children's picture book about fairies and talking animals and about service, and I'm like, that's lovely. We don't do any of those things, like, at all. And that's what I told her. And then she cried. Oh. And I thought,
Too many chemicals.
I'm sorry. So I spent most
Prozac.
of the pitch session like comforting her and telling her that it's okay, your story is still fine and you can still shop it to somebody. It's just not right for us. And I actually felt worse for the person coming in after. All we saw was in tears. So the way you avoid that is the simple fact of researching who you're actually pitching to.
Yeah.
And not being so emotionally invested in your work at that point that you forget that what you are doing is you are selling a product. Yes, writing is super creative and you pour your heart and soul into it, but at some point you have to turn that into a commodity and you are going to sell that to somebody who will pay you for it. And and if they say, I don't want to buy it, you're like, great, I'll find somebody else who does. And that should help you not cry in front of people.
Yeah. I was going to add, so even if you do that, you can still kind of mess it up. So I was at the same SCBWI
Yeah,
meeting
that's where we met.
Yeah, where we met with Emily.
Yeah.
And I had this list. I knew who the agents were who were going to be there. I read up on them. I researched. I figured out who was, a good fit for me. And as soon as I walked in, I saw one of them, and I was like, "Oh, there she is! I'll go talk to her." I have this well-memorized pitch and everything, and so I went straight up to her. I said, "Hey, I'm Luke. I'd like to talk with you about my book." And she said, "You're the first person who's approached me. I'm very impressed. Go." And then my brain shut down, and I just jabbered there for a second. And then I said, "All right, it was really good mumbling at you," and then walked away, right? Now, that's okay, right? Because why is that okay? So somebody please tell me why that's okay.
It's okay because everybody's nervous at talking to the gatekeeper that controls your entire future, right? That's what you feel like, is that you have 15 seconds or 30 seconds to convince me that that your book is amazing, and I suddenly will now, if I say yes, here's the standard rich and famous contract, you will, like, the heavens will open and the lights will shine down, and everybody's nervous about it. So I am used to people mumbling at me and being nervous and like struggling through a pitch. That's normal. That's what happens.
And have they cried when they've got the heavens open too?
Well, I don't bring the standard rich and famous contract with me. you gotta work for that. But that's why it's okay.
Yeah.
Because you guys are human and we are human, and you're nervous, and that's okay.
It's pretty normal to have your book feel like it's awesome until you have to explain it to somebody.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a pretty normal thing that you're like, it's so awesome, and then you have nothing, no words. And that's why it's really good to practice your pitches or to come up with a mashup or something that's quick and easy that people will understand, where it doesn't require you to talk a lot.
So between writing excuses, cruises, futurescapes, Kenna, you deal with a lot of agents and editors. Most of them are like vampires, right? That will destroy
They're
you.
the big
right?
ones,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're evil.
They're the
right?
big ones,
No,
yeah.
what are they actually like?
Is it weird that the first thing that came to mind is like they're all Slytherins? I really love Harry Potter, and I believe in house sorting. It's a real thing. So all of my favorite editors and agents are Slytherins, and they will refuse pieces. But they're great, wonderful, lovely people. The biggest thing that I've learned, I don't really have personally any horror stories because I don't talk to editors and agents and try and pitch them my book because I'm not there yet at all. So what I do is and this is probably actually my most valuable piece of advice, is that when I talk to editors and agents, I talk to them for the sole purpose of getting to know them and becoming their friend,
Right.
so that I can later, so I can maintain a relationship, and I now have really good friends who happen to be editors and agents. So I look at them more as like people first, and not necessarily a means to an end, which is what they get really, really sick of being viewed as.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure that's mostly common sense for most of you. Yeah, over just, writing excuses cruises and being at conventions with them, being on a boat for a week in the middle of the Caribbean with nowhere else to go. They do not like it when they're, like, approached like intensely and like pitch to on a boat where they can't escape. It's not a good idea. Don't do that. I've had to mediate those situations. Just don't, please, please. Yeah, just remembering to treat them like human beings and not,
And they're not really vampires, right?
They're not.
They're actually
Yeah.
extremely nice.
They're not really
for the most part,
vampires. I
right?
mean, like.
They're human beings.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like for the most part, my friends, when they've been approached by those really intense people who really want to tell them all about their book and how great it is, which is everything that someone should do, but maybe just not on a boat in the middle of the Caribbean, and also maybe like in an actual pitch session, they won't stand there and be like, "Don't talk to me, you're an idiot," because they're not actually that mean. They might think it.
You're right.
But
Exactly.
they will not say that to your face, which is the important part. They're very, very nice people. I feel like I'm just like butchering this, but
No, this is very helpful. Damage control, anybody over here?
She's right. We are just people. And that's the first thing you have to remember when you're going to talk to an agent or an editor is we're just people. And beyond that, how many of you have a book that you love? Did you notice I raised my hand too? I love books. That's why I got into this business. So already we have something in common, right? So already I just want to fall in love with a book. And you wrote a book that you love, right? Just tell me why you love it. I'm a reader first. Just tell me why you love your book and convince me that if I was in Barnes & Noble, that would be the book I'd pick up and take home with me.
And then if you happen to like Supernatural or Rush, you're...
Yes,
you're,
I'm a huge Rush fan.
All right, so yeah, just memorize that.
I have
Okay.
a fun story about that too, if you want a fun story.
Okay, so how, you two down there, how did it go? Getting the whole agent thing. Let's hear your story and.
Okay, so I actually, before I got published, I never had a pitch session. Like, I never pitched an agent. I talked to one once. I didn't pitch him. It was Moshe. Or is that his last name now? Because I was like, LTUE or Brandon Sanderson, I'm going to be best friends with you. But, like, I did all mine through just cold querying. Like, I'd never met my agent's Marlene Stringer. And I'd never met her before, and I just gave her, like, the standard query with her name at the top, and so that worked out. But, it really goes, like, kind of like the same thing everyone's saying. Like, they really are just people, like, once you're, like, past the gate, it's like, oh, you guys aren't even that great. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my agent and I love my editor, but, the fact of the matter is that your agent works for you. Like, you can fire them if you want. They make money off of you. So, it's just like, they have to be the gatekeeper, to let you, because, like, everybody wants them to work for them, but it's like, I don't know. And there's also, let me just tell you, I don't know if I'm going to say this, there's a lot of crappy agents out there.
Yeah, of course.
There's a lot of
You can say
really
that.
bad agents out there.
Yeah.
And some not so great editors, but you're good, don't worry. Not somebody else who I'm thinking of. But no, there's a lot of really bad ones. And so I think it's our habit a lot that whenever we get an opportunity, like if we get an offer from an agent or something, we just like jump right on that bandwagon. But the fact is that they're not the right agent for you, or if they shouldn't be an agent anyway, then it's just going to hurt your career.
Yeah.
So our agent has this bully tactic, right? So
She
usually,
can be scary.
oh,
It's
she's
great.
it's amazing.
As long as she uses it on someone else, it's good.
But so usually, like if an agent gives you an offer, they give you like 2 or 3 weeks to talk to anybody else who has your manuscript. So you say, hey, I have an offer of representation. So if you want to get on this boat, you better read my manuscript and stuff. So that's standard, right? So our agent's bully tactic is she gives you 2 days to say yes or no. Normally that is a huge red flag. So if you see the red flags, be wary. Fortunately, it worked out for us because she is a really good agent. But, be careful with what you do. Like I said, they are still people. And guess what? People, there are crappy people out there too. So you have good agents and good editors, and you have crappy agents and editors. So just do your homework.
Yeah.
And, like, don't be afraid of them. Try not to be afraid of them. They're not, like I said, they're not that great.
Do you guys all understand the relationship and the roles between an agent and an editor and an author?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, but would you go over it again?
Yeah.
So the author's job is to write the book, and then the author hires an agent, like you said, because it's part of your career. You're going to query the agent. You're going to then hopefully get an offer of representation from an agent, and then you're going to have a contract so that the agent will work for you. Then the agent's job is to sell your book to an editor at a publishing house, and then the editor and the author will work together on the book.
When the editor does something you don't like, you tell the agent, and the agent yells at the editor
Yeah.
and BCCs you.
Yeah, and so the editor and the author work together on the book, and the editor and the agent work together on the contract. And so that's one of the jobs of the agent, is to be the pit bull and to be the bad cop and to stand up and protect the author from whatever the publisher is doing that the author might not like. And the editor is also supposed to help the author, like, talk them off a ledge when they're like, my book is terrible and no one's ever going to buy it. And they're like, it's fine, everybody's going to buy it and we love it. And so the three roles actually all depend on each other, and we all work together to produce the best book that we can. But everybody has very specific roles that they do. Does that help?
So, do you work with, this is specifically for you, so do you work with authors that don't have agents as well?
I do, because at Shadow Mountain, we don't require you to have an agent. A lot of the big five, the big houses, you have to have an agent to even get your foot in the door, talk to an editor. But at Shadow Mountain, we don't require that. So if you have an agent, great. If you don't have an agent, that's great. We'll still look at your manuscript. And then we just work with you directly on the contract, as opposed to working with an agent.
Before we dive into more questions, let's get through just a couple more things. I wanted to return back to something that we mentioned. I think it was you, Lisa, who said, you know, you're approaching this person who's the gatekeeper of your future, right? And I think this is an interesting point that I see a lot with people when they're first doing a pitch session, that they have this idea that you or whoever is really, their future rests entirely with you, right? So that's where I think a lot of the nervousness comes from.
Absolutely.
Just to kind of give a perspective, even if somebody comes in and pitches to you, and based off the pitch you really like the idea, what are just the probabilities that you are the editor for them, that they're actually you're gonna be the person they wind up with?
For Shadow Mountain, it's super high probability, because this is the editorial department. Welcome. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
So if you pitch to me and you send your manuscript in to me and I read it and champion it, and then it goes through the whole process, everybody in the publishing house has to agree, you know.
Yeah.
And if we get to that point where it is in fact accepted, then I will most likely be the person who actually edits the manuscript and works with you, gets in the trenches with you.
Can we talk about the
on that.
agent side of that?
Yes.
The likelihood that the agent you're talking to will be your agent is probably like maybe 2%. The likelihood that you're going to stay with the first agent you sign with is also quite low. I signed with an agent, and I was for a young adult thriller, and that's where most of her connections were. And as we found out that it wasn't going to sell, went to acquisition stores and didn't sell, I just, during the meantime, switched genres and I started writing young adult fantasy. And my agent said, because agents, if they're going to pick up your work, they know who they're going to sell it to. It's a commodity, it's a business. And if they want to rep you, they already have an idea of which editors are going to want to see your work and who they're going to sell it to. So sometimes when you're told no in a cold query, has literally nothing to do with your work. It's they don't know who to sell it to. And if they're interested, they're interested because they think they can make money off you. It's a business. Remember that. Don't take every rejection super personally. So when I went to my first agent and said, I switched genres, she's like, but you're my thriller writer. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to write that right now. And I knew at that point that I needed to start transitioning to get out and find an agent who could sell this book. And I parted ways. We had a handshake deal, not a contract. Sometimes if you sign a contract, you have 30 to 60, well, sometimes 90 days before you're allowed to query or sign with another agent or another agency. It just depends on your agent or your agency that you're with. Some of them just want a handshake deal. I had a handshake deal. So within 2 weeks of parting ways with my agent, I queried and I had another offer for that fantasy that sold. That's just now my series. So you have to really champion. You have to really champion your own work and know where you want your career to go. And if an agent isn't that person, that's okay. It's about the experience of going in and pitching somebody. It was the experience of me communicating with an agent and realizing I really like who you are as a person, but I don't like how you see my career going, and I don't like this and this and this. So I found somebody who fit that, who is going to be a good advocate for me to those editors. But it took me being with the wrong person for a while to figure that out.
If you
Yeah.
had,
So I wanted to just add to that. So I think it's really important if you feel nervous around agents and editors to sort of use the voting rule, pitch early and pitch often, right?
Yeah.
Until you're comfortable around them, right? I've gone into pitch sessions because I was starting work and I wrote a query letter for a book that I hadn't actually written yet. And just to get feedback, right? And just for the sake of talking to an editor and kind of seeing what they had to say about it. And after a while, you can build up an immunity to that fear. I'm building, you get, I guess if you get bit by a cobra, building up immunity so that you'll be calm, you'll be ready, and then you're confident. You've gotten to that point where you realize they're just people, right? Okay, let's take questions.
So I've heard from many sources that you shouldn't pitch a book that isn't polished enough that you feel comfortable to sending it in. But you say pitch early and often just to get that experience. I mean, maybe specifically for you since you've done acquisitions, what do you feel like if someone hasn't finished the book but they're pitching it to you?
Did you hear her question in the back? Okay.
I have a story on this one.
I think if you're going to pitch your book because you want to sell it, it better be done. If you want to spend time in a pitch session with an editor or an agent to get feedback on an idea or on a query letter or to talk about the industry, that is totally acceptable. But come into it and establish that expectation. And because I've had people do that. They come in and they're like, I'm not done with my book, I'm not ready to pitch, but I'd love your feedback on the idea. Or could you work with me? Here's what I'm thinking my query letter might look like. Would you mind taking a look at it? Because I look at it as the time that you sign up for a pitch session with me, I want to talk about whatever you want to talk about. But if you're going to pitch me your book and I say, send me chapters, I want to see it, you better be ready to attach it and send it. There's nothing worse than getting a request and realizing I only have 10,000 words and now I have to write like 70,000 words in 2 weeks to like make it work and get it done. And you don't have it. And because future Lisa, way down the road, may not remember
Right.
present Lisa was interested in your idea. And you're gambling that I'm going to remember in 8 months or a year or 2 years that we talked and things will change too drastically for that pitch to have actually paid off.
Okay.
So be clear about your goals, what your goal is going into that pitch session with the agent or editor, and you should be fine, right?
Okay.
If you go and if you just hand them a query letter for a book you haven't read, and they go, yeah, that's great, send it to me. You're like, oh, I haven't written anything yet. That would be bad.
Kind of a red flag.
Okay, right over here. Yep.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, when you switch agents, are you more likely to get accepted after you've had an agent before? Or is it like ground zero all over again?
I would say that you are one up because you were repped. You do want to say that you parted amicably with your agent, and you want to make sure that they know that the work that you're querying has not gone on submission already, because they don't want to resubmit something to someone else. So it needs to be new work. And what if something like I didn't re-query the thriller, I queried the fantasy that had never been out before. And if you are going to query a book that has been out, you need to make sure you're really upfront about that and that you have an idea of who it's gone to, because the agent's going to want to know that. Okay. Just be ready to answer a lot of questions.
Right here.
Lisa, can an editor or you specifically recommend an agent if you do like a book and you take it on? Do you ever recommend an agent then? And or rep the book for a film?
It's way easier for her to screw you over if you don't have an agent. So.
Yeah, it's true. My job is to make money for the publisher.
Gotcha.
That's my job. So I'm in it to help protect the publisher's interests.
Gotcha.
And so it sometimes is hard for me to say, you know what you should do is you should find yourself an agent who will fight me on the contract and get you more money. And so it's always better. Now, there have been plenty of times where we've acquired a book, we've worked with an author who is unagented, and in the process of the review and the acquisition and all of that, they have gotten an agent.
Right.
And then we're like, all right, then we're going to talk to them. But it's very rare that I recommend an agent, because I think that the agent-author dynamic is so important, and that employer-employee relationship is so important, and I'm not going to get in the middle of that.
And then can you recommend, if you do acquire a book, to film companies?
That depends on who retains the film rights.
Okay.
That's one of the things that your agent will do, and they'll negotiate and say, okay, well, you can have the paperback rights, but we want to keep the film rights, and you're going to do the audio rights. And I mean, that's so much the negotiation is who ends up with the rights. If your agent ends up with the film rights, then your agent's job is to sell it to a film industry. If the publisher ends up with it, then yeah, we have people that try to sell the film rights to a film company.
Okay.
Can we do the guy in the blue?
Yeah.
So patient.
He's been so patient.
Guy in the blue.
Thanks. You mentioned that your thriller agent, you only had a handshake agreement. If you had had a formal contract, or a formal contract with an editor who did thrillers, could you have been forced to continue on the thriller genre? And should we be wary of signing a contract for that reason?
Yeah, that's why I recommend an agent. Before you sign any sort of publishing contract, they will be able to make sure that you're not getting locked into something that you don't want to be locked into. At the agent level, it's easier to part ways and to move on, not so much the publishing level. So it's actually not a bad thing. I mean, this agent had a contract I could have signed, but she said, if you want to do a handshake deal, that's fine, because if you don't want to work with me, I don't want to hold you in it. So it just really depends on the agent that you're dealing with and what their policies are, and you should know what you want that to be. In fact, Jim McCarthy, he's an agent. He listed a while ago, you can Google it, questions to ask an agent on your phone call. It's from an agent's perspective, it gives you a really good overview of ideas to kind of get you going, because you're going to freeze up. You'll get on the phone with them, and they're going to talk about how much they love you and love your work, and they say, do you have any questions? And you're going to be all like, I feel great because you just said how much you love my work. But you might, it's true, yeah, they're very smart about how they do it. You might not actually remember anything that you want to ask, and you'll get off the phone and go, oh wait, I don't know anything about this agent or how this works. So have a list of questions ready and things that are important to you when you're on the phone, and don't feel like a jerk. Ask as many things that you can. And do that in the pitch session too. That's a good time to find out, how do you work? What's your communication style? Talk to the agent. I don't know, see if they really are a good fit for you. If the pitch session's going well, get a one-up on that and ask them. They'll be willing to talk with you.
And going along with that, if an agent does ask you to sign a contract that's long-term at all, like anything more than a year for sure, that's a big red flag.
Yeah.
'Cause, like, I've heard horror stories about authors. I read this blog from an author, and I can't remember who it is, but she realized that she and her agent weren't fitting anymore right after she renewed a 2-year contract.
Yeah.
And so she couldn't do anything with her career for 2 years. So handshake deals are actually very nice.
Did you have something, Kenna?
I have several somethings.
All right, let's hear it.
So, what they were talking about with talking to an agent on the phone and having questions and everything, an important thing to remember in those moments when they're like, I love your work, it's so great, like, you're an awesome, and it's great, which is all very, very flattering to hear, but agents are essentially talking to you, asking you to let you be their boss.
Right.
Like, so
Your
you have to remember
commodity.
that when an agent is talking to you and, like, offering, like, kind of testing out the, hey, I want to represent you and I want to sell your book for you, you have to remember, like, okay, awesome, cool, because that's really, really, really exciting, and that's really good news. You also have to remember, like, I'm essentially interviewing them. Like, this phone call is their interview to see if I want to take them on as an employee. Because as a writer, you are starting a business. Like, writers have, like, you are your own business, and your agent is your first employee, and they should be the employee who is going to fight for you, who is going to tell your publisher, nuh-uh, we're getting more money, or no, that's not okay, don't talk to them like that, you don't get to talk to my author like that. they're the person who like they said is going to be your pit bull and like fight for you, and so when you're in that first phone call, don't be overwhelmed by all the nice things they say, because flattery will get people a lot of places, and just don't let that cloud the idea that like they need to be able to work for you, and you need to be able to work with them. And if that's not going to work, then you need to figure that out immediately. And I had something else, but I forgot.
Okay.
So,
Do you two know who is next in line? Because you have a better sense.
I'm just gonna pick my cousin because.
All right, good. Hey,
Hey,
cousin. Yeah, all right.
this is a follow-up for an earlier question. In a pitch session, if you like the idea but it's not right for your house, have you ever said, well, maybe you should go talk to...
Oh yeah,
yeah,
totally.
I definitely have. I've done that probably, honestly, more than I should, and because I really don't do a whole lot for them, I'm going to tell you. When I was taking queries as an editor for Jellyfish, I'd be like, I really like this idea. Like, this idea is really, really, really good. You can do way better than a small press. Like, I should have told people in pitch sessions, like, you can do better than me. Like,
And that's
I'm a
why
good...
she doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like, I'm such a bad editor, because I'm like, I'm a good editor, and I can do a good job with your book, but, like, I know that there are people who could do a better job. And that's also part of being an editor, is saying, like, your book is good. For instance, I'll share for instance, one of my friends, she works for, oh my gosh, I can only, Saga Press is the imprint of
Simon & Schuster.
Simon & Schuster, thank you. She is a managing editor for her own imprint now, but she received one of the original queries for Pierce Brown's Red Rising book, and his agent was like, we want you to do this, we think you'd be a great editor. And she told Pierce, she's like, I can do this. If you want to make this book young adult, I can do this, we can do a good job, and it will sell well. But then she told him, but if you want to keep this book adult and do it the way you are, I'm not the editor for you. And there are people who can do a great job with this book and sell it just as well as I could, but in the way you've originally written it. Because it would have had to be kind of edited for young adult instead of the adult that it is. And so she essentially said, you know, I'd love to represent this, I'd love to take on this book, but if you want to keep it the way it is, there are people who will love this book and who will take this book from you. Like, you can sell this to someone else that's a better fit than me. And he did. And so she didn't edit his book, but he obviously, it's, you know, it is what it is. And so there are instances where, as an editor, you say, I'm not the right fit for this book, but this book will be great in someone else's hands. So, like, keep querying, keep
That's
putting it
awesome.
out there. Because it's true, like, when, as an editor, like, you know, like, if I can't fix the things that are wrong with this book, because most of the time when you're an editor and you're receiving queries of books, even from people who have agents, like, you read a manuscript and you're like, this is great, I love it, but it's got these problems, this, and this, that I would need to fix or address before it could be published. And so then as an editor, your job is to go, am I the right person to fix these problems?
Right.
Am I the one who can fix these problems and make this book the best it can be? And if it's not you, you have to be able to say, I'm not your editor. And,
Do you tell them who the editor you recommend should be?
I mean, yeah, if I know the editors, like if I know this so-and-so would be a great one to query, so-and-so would do this. Or in some cases, I mean, and it depends on relations, but also, it would also honestly depend on your agent, because if an editor says, you should try and sell it to this editor, and your agent's like, I have no connection to them, I've never done anything, that could be a little bit of a problem. I mean, not necessarily, it just means your agent isn't going to be as, like, prepared to be like, hey buddy, I've got this great book, you should read it because it's awesome. They're not going to quite have that level of camaraderie with that specific editor. But yeah, it is very, very possible.
Lisa, did
Would
you
you
add
be-
anything on that? There's a forest of hands here, but
Yeah, just to piggyback quickly on that, I did actually the exact same thing when Ali Condi turned in Matched to me, and I read it in 2 days, and I called her up and I said, you don't even know what you have with this book. You should not publish it with us. Because we could do it, just that exact same thing. It was perfect for Shadow Mountain. I loved it. I would have killed to have been the editor on that book. But I knew that it was destined for bigger and better things than we could do for it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have never been so happy to say, no, I'm not publishing this book, so that you would be free to take it to somebody else. And that was the book that got her the agent, and that was the book that got her on the New York Times, and that was the book that changed a lot of things for Allie. And I loved being a part of that, little part of that story, even though I desperately wanted that book. We weren't the right place for it. And in pitch sessions, I'll do the same thing. If somebody comes in with an idea, and it's a good idea, and I know it's not right for us, or I know I'm not the right editor, but I know who you should talk to, you bet I'll say, tell them I sent you. Tell them I said that this was a good idea and they should talk to you, because publishing is a very tight-knit community. We talk, we know each other, we network, and if somebody comes to me with a little card, with a little note saying, hey, I pitched to so-and-so and they thought it was that you might be a good match, I perk up at that. I pay attention to that.
let's take and way in the back.
Yes, would you recommend running your manuscript through a freelance editor before pitching it?
Dun, dun, dun.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Especially if it's just a pitch, you know enough to talk about your book and sell your book in a pitch session, because it's just a conversation. There's probably varying schools of thought on if you should hire a freelance editor before you actually then submit it for acquisitions. I suppose it depends on how confident you are in your writing.
Critique partners are free.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, probably, this is like shooting myself in the foot because I also do freelance editing work, but potentially more valuable than hiring an editor who doesn't really have any investment in your book other than the money you're gonna give them, is having a small but loyal group of beta readers, of people who you can give your book to and say, okay, rip it apart. Like, tell me what you hate about this, and who can give you feedback and say, okay, well, I hated this character, and this is why. People who can tell you, I didn't like this, and it's for these 3 specific reasons. Those are the people that you want to be reading your book kind of before you're querying agents and editors, because those are the people who are going to say, this is a stupid idea. Like, you should do this, or this instead. And maybe none of those suggestions are going to you're going to actually do that, but it's going to get you thinking of like, maybe this is a problem that I need to fix, and then you'll be able to fix it in your own way, within your own magic system, or within your own world, or whatever. But yeah, that being said, getting an editor to look at it, if you're not sure of your technical ability or how strong your grammar is, or if your prose is too purple, things like that, that could prove valuable.
Okay. You.
Okay. The realities of publishing amongst, of trying to find editors and agents across different genres. For example, I have a lot of different interests. I like to write across a lot of different things. Obviously, with something like, the young adult LDS fiction or LDS romance, I would have a very limited market as far as editing companies go. But I'm also really interested in epic fantasy, and I've got a few things written with there, or some horror. So, what are some of the realities of trying to get your whole collection out there?
Emily.
Oh, yeah. No, I was sitting here going, I wrote in every genre almost. Well, middle grade fantasy, and my middle grade didn't work because my voice was off, but the fantasy worked, and that's kind of how I ended up going that way. I think you have to try a bunch of things and then realize that when your agent picks you up, their intent is to sell your work, and if they sell your work, they're going to expect you to kind of write in that work and build your readership for a while. Yeah. So whatever you sell first, plan at least $3 before you are going to, at least $3 before you switch. And that's just smart marketing. It's smart business to build your readership that way. Don't be too scattered with it. You can tell your agent you have these ideas, future, but really choose a genre for you and a market for you to write in to become as expert as you can in that field. That's what your agent wants to see. They don't want to see that you get really distracted with this little idea and it takes you there. They want someone super focused and professional with what it is that you've sent them.
Gotcha.
And then they're likely to help you if you do want to transition, right? Like I remember Laura Renner talking about how working with Maggie Stiefvater, she had been writing in, I forget where she started, but anyway.
Paranormal romance.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And so she wrote in her genre for a little bit, and then Laura was like, you know, you've got a voice that we could kind of go in this direction. You interested? And so kind of helping her actually expand her audience at appropriate moments once she'd established herself in a particular market.
Mm-hmm.
Can
So-
I add on? Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Do you want to rock, paper, scissors?
Yes.
Yes. So I would add on to that. So if you want to write multiple genres, here's the thing. So if you have an agent, they don't necessarily have to take all of your books. Let's say you want to write fantasy, romance, thrillers, and then LDS, okay? If you can find an agent that covers most of those genres, then great. Because, for example, if you go with Josh Adams, who is a fantastic agent, but you decide you want to write adult, he doesn't represent adult. If you want to write, so I write both, so I found an agent who represents both. The thing is, you can go through them with those books that you like while taking your LDS and maybe shifting it to Covenant by yourself. Your agent doesn't have to be part of that. Another thing is, especially if you are established in a genre and you want to write something else, you will probably need a pen name. So I have a science fiction contemporary that we're shopping right now, which is different from the other stuff I write. And my agent has told me there's a good chance you're going to have a pen name because people see Charlie Holmberg, they expect kissing and fantasy and otherworld stuff, you know, and so if they pick up this thing, they'll be really surprised. And so there's a good chance you'll have to use a pen name as well.
So, something that I didn't mention because I don't work for him anymore, but I was the personal assistant for Dan Wells for a couple of years. And so he is the master of writing in every possible genre and taking it to his agent being like, sell this book. And his agent, bless her heart, does because she's a great agent and she's wonderful. But he also spent a long time, 6 books in fact, writing supernatural thriller. And then from there he's written young adult cyberpunk, and he's written adult apocalyptic horror, and like he's done all of these different things, and he's been lucky that his agent has been like, okay, you've got another crazy idea, like let's do it, like okay, and not every agent's going to be able to do that. So what Charlie was saying of like, you know, getting, you know, I've known authors who have had a couple different agents for their different pen names in their various genres. They have an agent who does their romance. They have an agent who does their thrillers. They have and so they have a couple different agents working with all of their different genres at once. But again, these are people who have a pretty high turnover rate and who are cranking out books at a pretty intense rate that that not everybody can maintain. So you know. It's important to know if your agent is going to be game for you just being like, now I'm going to write thrillers instead of young adult romance. It's important to know if your agent is going to be able to handle kind of that immediate switch and then know how to sell you still without potentially changing, you know, without having a pen name. Because Dan writes under his own name. He does not have pen names, which sometimes is a disadvantage for him. Because people are like, what do you write? And he's like, well, everything.
A bunch of stuff.
But also, I guarantee I have something that you'll like.
But it also, the flip side of that is not only does he have a good agent that can sell everything, he's a good enough writer that he can write in
Yeah.
a number of different things. And you might be interested in writing in a lot of different genres, and you may find in truth that you're really best at one thing.
Right.
And so it's perfectly acceptable. In fact, I'd probably encourage you, try writing in a lot of different genres. Find out the stuff that you're bad at so that you don't waste your time writing it. And then you know what you're good at so that you can establish yourself and say, you know what, I actually really have a middle grade voice. That's where I want to be. That's what I want to do. That's where I want to focus myself, and not try to then say, oh, but then I should probably also write in young adult, and I should probably write steampunk, and I should probably write adult horror as well, because that's just gonna fracture your time and your interest and your talent.
This is one of the most unorthodox pieces of advice I think I'll ever give on a panel.
Wow.
But if you're trying to figure out what genres you're good at and what genres you're not, fan fiction is a great way to do that.
Yeah.
And that's a really unorthodox thing, but as one who has written over 300,000 words of fan fiction, I can tell you that I have learned what I'm good at doing and what I am not good at doing. Because if you take characters that you already know super well, and you put them in like a zombie apocalypse, and all of a sudden you have to write these characters who have established personalities, but you have to do it while they're running from a horde of zombies, you're going to find out real quick if you can handle writing apocalyptic horror, if you can handle writing blood and gore and violence. And, you know, people who read stuff for free online are not going to pull punches. They're going to be like, your writing sucks. And as the person who writes it, you're
I
like...
paid too much to read it.
You're like, you didn't pay anything except your time. If you didn't like it, you didn't have to read it. Like, why are you like? But you get really honest, really valuable feedback pretty instantly. It's a lot of instant gratification in your writing skills, and that's not for everyone. But it's something that has helped me personally as a writer and not just as an editor learn what I'm good at doing, and it's pretty low risk. You know, you have an anonymous pen name. No one knows who you are. You can just try out a bunch of different stuff, and if it doesn't work, the most you get are a few mean comments.
We are out of time.
Can I just say one last thing?
Yes.
Just to tie it back to the title of this panel, which is Don't Freak Out. Please don't freak out. When you come talk to an agent or an editor, speaking from the person on this side of the desk, I can sense your energy. I get my read off of you. And if you come in that room and you are freaking out, I will probably freak out with you. And that will not help. So if you come in confident and calm and prepared to talk about how much you love your book and remember that I am a real person, then I will remember that you are a real person too, and I will be confident and calm, and we can actually have a good conversation about your book that will benefit both of us. So please don't freak out. It's going to be okay.
Please join me in